Welcome back to the Belgium Business Club. We start today a series of sessions with successful Belgian entrepreneurs in the US. The goal of this program is to put a light on the Belgians active in the US and bring you some insight if you want to launch your company, adapt it, or change your activity. Please let me introduce our guest today, Katrien Herdewyn. She's the founder of Elegnano, which is literally and figuratively a combination of elegance and nanotechnology. In Belgium, the company is best known for its in-house footwear label for men and women. After landing in the Bay Area, thanks to the Prince Albert Fund in 2017, Katrien used her background as engineer and designer to build up her consulting branch to help other fashion and tech companies in Europe and the US combine high-tech with stylish products. Katrien has received several Belgian and international awards and recognitions, including Startup of the Year in 2015, Best Designer Footwear Label in 2019, and Top 100 Fashion Industry Leaders in 2021. Please ask your question by using the Q&A or the chat box. Katrien will be happy to answer to them at the end of her presentation. Thank you very much, Katrien, to be with us today. The floor is all yours.
All right, well, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. So thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you. Hello, good morning to everyone in California and good evening to the people in Belgium. I myself am in San Francisco at the moment, but as the title of the event and also my name, Katrien Herdewyn, may reveal, I am from Belgium. I was born and raised near Leuven. Today, I want to share my entrepreneurial journey, my story with you. And I'm going to start by telling a little bit about myself. I'm not sharing my resume for the sake of sharing my resume. It's because it really gives an idea of why or how I ended up doing what I'm doing today. So the story actually starts in the early 90s. As a little girl, I was obsessed with shoes. I used to build a little shoe store in front of the garage, trying to sell old shoes to my parents and my sister. I would spend hours underneath tables just to look at people's shoes without being distracted by everything else. I just really loved them as little pieces of art that were also very functional. But with time, as I grew older, I developed an interest in science and mathematics. There are also not a lot of books and museums, especially for kids, about shoes. So it kind of went more to the background. And at 18, I decided to go study engineering. I got a bachelor in electrical engineering and material sciences, followed by a master's in nanoscience and nanotechnology, all of that at the KU Leuven in Belgium. When I graduated, they offered me a position to do doctoral research in nanotechnology at the Department of Solid State Physics and Magnetism. And at the same time, I still loved shoes. It was just buying shoes and liking to go to shoe stores. But I discovered that there was a new art program in Belgium, a 4-year program where you could learn how to design and make shoes. So it was a 4-year study in fashion footwear design. So I applied for it and was accepted. Now, I didn't want to study without working anymore after already 5 years in university. So I decided to combine the two. And those were 4 very hard years with a lot of work, not a lot of sleep, where during the day I would be working as a doctoral researcher during the week. And then on the weekends and in the evenings, I would learn how to design and make shoes. During those 4 years, the seeds for my company were really planted. During that period, I was working in 2 fields that are pretty opposite if you look at it. Like most of us would. You have the fashion industry, which is extremely commercialized. Each and every one of us has a lot of shoes. I mean, at least one pair. Most of us have more than one pair. It's been around. It's a very old industry. It's been around for centuries. And then you have nanotechnology, which is still fairly futuristic and new. A lot of R&D and innovation is happening there. but there is not too many commercial products yet. So they were kind of far away from one another. At the same time, to me, they actually made a lot of sense together. Like early on, I started looking at my background with material sciences, helped me with selecting materials for the shoes, like experimenting with new ways of making the shoes better. Obviously, heels were a very nice challenge to calculate under what angle and what heel heights were possible. Even the microscopy images that I made during my research in nanotechnology were an inspiration for the designs that I was making. So early on, the two like flowed into one another. On the same level, I obviously also had the tension that I was explaining earlier, that to me, it kind of felt counterintuitive that an industry like the footwear industry, there was not that much innovation going on. When I learned about the construction of shoes, how they were made, yes, we've replaced people with robots and natural materials by synthetic ones, but in essence, the construction of a shoe hasn't changed that much over 100 years. And as an engineer, that just felt a little weird, because most of the products I had learned about and worked with, they were constantly evolving, and even the ones that had been around for centuries. When I finished as a footwear designer, so when I graduated, my doctoral contract with the KU Leuven also ended, as it goes with doctoral research. So I had a few options. I could either go work as an engineer, go work as a footwear designer, or start my own company. And I decided to do the last one. At the time I was 27. I also didn't have a lot of responsibilities. Like I hadn't bought a house, didn't have any children. So I also didn't have a job anymore at the time. I had to start over anyway. So it felt like a really good time to just take the plunge and start my own company. As Jean-Baptiste already said, the name of the company is Elegnano, and it's literally a combination of the words elegance and nanotechnology smashed together and then pronounced the Italian way, both because I have Italian roots and also because the footwear that we create is made in Italy. You can see two pictures of some of the designs that we have with the brand. So they're both shoes for men and women. The footwear label is what's best known in Belgium, but it's not the only part of the company. So Elegnano is actually a fashion tech brand. So it's not a footwear label in itself. So when you look at the pictures, you could think like, those just look like normal shoes. I don't really see the technology or the nanotechnology in it. That you don't see the nanotechnology is pretty obvious. If you're not familiar with what it is, very short explanation: a nanometer compares to a meter, like the diameter of a blueberry compares to the diameter of the Earth. So nanotechnology takes place at an extremely small scale. You can't see it, you can't feel it, but it's there, and you can change the properties of a material with it. The laws of physics and chemistry don't really apply at that scale. The ones that we know from macro scale and even micro scale. So that's why they made a separate field of it. And that's also why I love nanotechnology for fashion, because I really want to use technology as a tool to make the products better, rather than use technology that is visible. So we're not creating products where you have moving parts or lights that go on. That's definitely also a branch within fashion technology, but that's not what we're doing here. So there is definitely a lot of engineering in the shoes, and I'd like to highlight a few of them to point them out. So the first one is the nanotechnology itself that is in the leather. So it's kind of a chemistry step. It's not electronics like some people think. It is called the lotus effect. That's the basic principle from nanotechnology that we applied to our leather. It's probably one of the most commercialized applications in nanotechnology. And it is named after the lotus flower, a plant you might know. It grows in water, in muddy pools as well, but it stays clean even in those dirty pools. And the reason for that is because even though the leaf, when you look at it, when you feel it, when we look at it with our eyes and touch it with our hands, it feels very smooth and soft. But when you look at it on a very small scale, you see what you see in this picture over here is actually a ton of tiny little pillars, and on top of those pillars, even more little pillars. And those make that surface super hydrophobic. And that's a term to say that water droplets, when they fall on it, they stay in their droplet shape and they just roll off. So that's a very nice principle to apply to leather to make sure that your leather can stay nicer, that you have to use less shoe polish, and that it isn't impacted by rain and other weather elements as much, because leather, just like our skin, absorbs water, so that makes it kind of difficult. The technology, so the lotus effect, is already, like I said, commercially available and applied. Like the car industry uses it, the window industry uses it on glass. You have it on paints for outside of buildings, the outside of buildings. So it's definitely not something new. It's been around and researched a lot. The tricky thing with leather is that leather is, of course, an animal skin. So it's more difficult to work with than something like a polymer, the material that we've created ourselves. It's also, every tannery has its own secret sauce, making that you can't just apply this on every leather product that you know. We selected a specific type of leather that is actually only possible to use if you have the nanotechnology on it. Why did I want to use that leather? Because it's extremely soft and delicate, and it turns your shoe into, can make it a lot more comfortable, in the sense that normally when you try to fit your feet in shoes, they're kind of like a hard mold. And usually actually our feet are impact, so they get the bunions and they're softer than the shoe that you put your feet in. Whereas the shoes that we try to create are the opposite, or more like socks or gloves that put themselves around your feet. That's the reason why we use a lot of small pieces where you see seams everywhere, so they fit better around your feet, and also why we wanted to use this leather that is, without nanotechnology, not even possible to use for shoes. Another element that you may have noticed through the pictures, which is very signature for our brand, is the special stiletto with the shell at the back. So we definitely have that for an aesthetic reason. So it is a design element. It actually is inspired by the lotus flower. When you look at it from the back, it looks like a closed one, from the side like one that is opening. But it is really an engineering decision, where it is based on, or the principle. As a physicist, as an engineer, I was always very intrigued by the stability, the mechanics of a stiletto. Why is it always so unstable and wobbly? You have the obvious reason, you're walking on a very small surface, but we've done trickier things in our society. We send people into space, so we can figure out something, a mechanical and dynamic problem like this one. So I really looked at the production process. How can we improve this? How can we create something that makes a very thin surface actually feels like you're walking on a thick surface? So that's why the little shell is at the back, and you'll see it come back in all our stilettos. And then another one that we spend a lot of time on is the insole. When you stand on a high heel like this, you don't want your weight just to be at the heel and at the tip of your toe, because then you build too much pressure there, but also at the bridge in between the two. So selecting the right materials and the composition, and build this really like you would build a bridge, that it also carries the weight in between. So those are a few things. These are all for men's shoes, for women's shoes, but obviously in our men's shoes, the same principle for the leather, used a much softer leather that more fits around your feet. Also in the design, paying a lot of attention to the shape and where the seams are, to make sure that they're as comfortable as possible. From a business perspective, early on with Elegnano, we switched to a slow fashion business model. It's the opposite, if you're not that familiar with it, it's the opposite of fast fashion, which you might know from H&M, Zara, Primark. They're all brands that are part of the fast fashion movement. With slow fashion, it means that we're not part of the cycle, the traditional seasonal cycle. So we don't have new collection. After 5 months, they go on sale and then a new collection launches again. Like right now in Belgium, the sale season is on. So you have discounts in all stores. At the end of this month, beginning of August, new collections will come in everywhere. And those are your fall winter collections. And then the same happens again 6 months later. We approach it in the slow fashion business model really came from an environmental perspective, so for sustainability, but it also kind of is the approach of more tech companies or engineering companies where you don't just throw away a product after 6 months and start again from scratch. Our collection is kind of permanently available. We still launch new products, but it doesn't matter at 6 months what the state is of our stock. Like when we produce a certain amount of inventory. When it's sold out, that could be after 2 months, but that could also be after 8 months. We'll produce more. We'll produce another batch, sometimes with in different colors, but very often also with tweaks to the design to make it even better. So kind of improve on the product instead of just doing it for the design, the form, but really look at the function as well. A consequence, though, as a consequence of for choosing for slow fashion is that you can't really work with traditional stores because they still do sale. They also have to. You can't, as a store, decide not to put your products on discount 2 months here when everyone around you does. So as that decision implied that we had to become a digital or e-commerce label. So since 2017, we are a completely digital brand. So end of 2016, beginning of 2017, we completely switched. So you can buy our shoes worldwide, but only through our own online store. We do try to be as innovative as possible to make it as easy as possible for a customer, obviously, to find the right size and figure out the right fit when they buy the shoes. So that's the footwear label. Definitely an important part, is kind of where it started. But very early on, as soon as we started going to Milan Fashion Week and the others, other brands started coming to us asking, well, we also would like to implement technology in our shoes or in our handbags, jewelry. It was mostly fashion labels, clothing. Can you help us with that? Can you help us find the right technological partner? Can you help us figure out what technology we should actually go after? And so it was never, still not, we're not stimulating fashion companies to build a tech branch within their company or tech companies to build a fashion label. It's really like bridging the two and finding the right way and having them work together that we do. So that started really organically and then really build it out once I came to the United States with more customers in all kinds of industries. We have companies that develop architectural products. You have obviously all the fashion. You also have really tech companies that develop virtual reality glasses or augmented reality glasses. So all kinds of products, as long as it's has the common denominator is really that they're elegant products and that they want to do something with technology in them, or they're tech products and they want to make it more elegant. So that combination goes across the board. So how did I end up in the United States? It is indeed through the Prince Albert Funds from the King Boudewijn Foundation. If you're not familiar with it and you're under 30, it's definitely worth looking into, and you're from Belgium. So the grant offers you the opportunity to gain international business experience. You can go anywhere in the world as long as it's outside of Europe. And of course, it's for a Belgian company project. I decided to go to San Francisco, obviously not for the fashion part of it, and I should have gone to LA, but I chose it for the technology, and actually really for fashion technology as well, because there is a strong community in fashion tech here. So there are a lot of opportunities. I was never really the startup founder who wanted to make it in or to Silicon Valley. So it's really more San Francisco, where you have a good combination of tech and art that is really interesting to work and find different, like I was saying, working in different industries gives a lot of inspiration on seeing what the opportunities are, how they are approaching solutions and how they could be applicable in other industries. For Elegnano, though, from day one, we had to go international. The footwear was produced or is produced and has always been produced in Italy. So all our suppliers and manufacturers are in Italy. Then for selling the shoes, they're not a traditional Belgian product. Most people that look at the design actually think that they're Italian. So it's from the start focused on selling them in different countries. For the shoes, we focus always on Europe and Asia because they have a strong affinity with European fashion and Belgian fashion as well. And for the United States, we're focusing more on the consulting services and less on the shoes. You can buy the shoes via the online store here, but we're not focusing that much at launching the shoes here. Then I also wanted to briefly address the elephant in the room that we're still all living with, the pandemic. If you can imagine, if you're selling shoes like I do, that people mostly wear for special occasions, and a dinner party can be a special occasion, but they're not shoes that you wear to sit at home behind a computer. So like most fashion brands, unless you were selling like loungewear or sweatpants and sweaters, the pandemic, you definitely saw a decline in your sales starting in March 2020. And so did we with our footwear, but we were actually very well prepared based on the decisions that I've actually mentioned here throughout. I'm not going to say that I'm the visionary founder that saw it all coming and then build that resilience in the company that way. Definitely not, but we made some decisions that prepared us very well for it. And one of them is obviously the fact that we have the diversification in our revenue stream. I wasn't only dependent on the shoes. We also had the consulting service that was already in place. So when I saw that there didn't look like the pandemic was going to be over in 6 weeks, we really doubled down on getting more consulting clients. A lot of people actually also wanted to start a business in that period. A lot of people, especially here in San Francisco. I was at the time also in San Francisco when the pandemic started. So a lot of people that lost their job launched businesses. So it was really good for us to get new clients, people wanting to do new things. At the same time, since we have this slow fashion business model, we were in this cycle of there was some stuff and there's always stuff in the pipeline, but we could easily say, well, let's not produce now. If stores canceled orders, we weren't affected by it because we weren't working with stores. So we just kind of put everything in production that we were planning to produce on hold to wait until the world was opening up again and people would start buying shoes again to avoid having a ton of our money stuck in inventory, which is what happened to a lot of brands. And then we also didn't do sale. If you were in Belgium, you might remember that last year they pushed the summer sale with 1 month. So we were not part of that either. So we are completely e-commerce. So people were used to buying our shoes online as well. And then the last thing is because I've always been traveling a lot for the company. Obviously, the production is in Italy. I was in Belgium, but that's still the same continent. When I started working with American companies and came to the US, I was dividing my time between Europe, so Italy or Belgium, and San Francisco. And that's a 9-hour time difference. So that makes it a little more complicated. But because we've been doing that for 2.5, 3 years, my entire team was used to the remote working. Like everyone's been remote working, only the new clients, but the people that we've been working with, the people within the Elegnano team, we've always had been really used to figuring everything out from a distance with one another. So that really was another thing we didn't have to adapt to. And all of that brought together in the fact that 2020 was actually a really good year for us. And so despite what had been happening, and then we obviously don't want it, none of us wanted it to happen. It's not a great thing. We really made the best of it with Elegnano. So that was it. This is contact information. I didn't really look at the questions. Maybe Jean-Baptiste does, but yes. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Katrien, for your fascinating business path between Italy, Belgium, and the United States of America. And your resilience, you told us about the COVID period, but I think it's really nice that you you are going through that period like everyone in the world. We have one question from Mark in the audience. How does the cost of your shoes compare to the traditional shoes manufacturing, assuming you are at scale, which you may not be at yet? So in the chat.
So yeah, we produce not huge quantities, but we also, that's one of the reasons also why we don't, not really want to, I always wanted to produce in the south of Europe because we have a great heritage there. But the applicability of the nanotechnology in itself, while it's not scalable in the sense that you can't just apply it to all tanneries in the world because of the research, the R&D that goes into it, it is actually very easy to roll out. So it's not like we're having to invest a lot of time in, as is the case with a lot of products that integrate technologies, a lot of manual work going in there. All of the improvements that we did are very easy to just roll out on a large scale. The nanotechnology, for example, is really just an additional step in the tanning process. So it happens when the leather is made. There is nothing, once the leather goes to the shoe manufacturer, they don't know that it's there. I mean, they do know because I told them, but it's not like they still have to do or take care in a special way. So we could send that leather to make 100 shoes, but we could also send that leather to make 2 million shoes. It doesn't make a difference. And also what manufacturer we send it to. And so as far as the tanneries that we work with, they work with huge brands as well as small brands. So the runs that they can do is also not, same for the heels. They're just, we produce them in quite a large amount. So we have a standard base on which then we can add color. So also there to make it possible, because we do a lot of limited editions because it creates some kind of exclusivity, especially in the segment that we are in. So we might do small runs just because we know that people will buy that because they know they won't get it for a very long time. But so the scalability of it is definitely not like a lot of fashion tech products are today that are very difficult, and also to maintain afterwards is often like when you build in electronics in products, you can't really put them in your laundromat. So it's kind of the applicability there of the product. It's just like production wise, all the other ones, all other shoes.
Okay. I have another question from another Katrien. Did you need to raise money at some stage, or do you plan to do it again? What kind of strategy you would recommend to contact VCs or business angels, especially in the Bay Area and in general in the US?
So I mean, one of the nice things of working in a market that is super saturated already is that you don't necessarily need to raise money. It's not like tech companies. I have a lot of tech clients, and there we're constantly raising money, trying to grow as quickly and as fast as possible, especially for the footwear label, actually, which is where you would think that I needed the most capital investment. For the consulting service, less so. Is that in fashion, actually, you become more believable the longer you are around. So it's not because you have a ton of money in year one that you will gain immediately a lot of traction. So being around and showing, I mean, if you want to make it into magazines like Vogue and Marie Claire, where we all were in, you don't do that from, you can get an ad in those magazines, but it doesn't have the same value, obviously, as if they write an article about you. So in that sense, we didn't need a ton of money. I used the win-win loan principle that if you're from Belgium, based on your name, you might be. So there is basically the friends, fools, and family funding strategy that we use there. So I had about 120K to start with. So it's not nothing, but it's not a huge amount either. And we grew from that organically. Also, because I wanted to, there was always interest from investors to make us grow faster, but really chose to do it this way to make sure that we were profitable as quickly as possible and just build on the collections there. Also kind of linked to the slow fashion business model, since a lot of what the costs that come with fashion is constantly launching new collections. And if you're able to work with products that you already have and build on them, the investments are smaller. And as far as contacting VCs and business angels, so I didn't do that myself. I did it, I have done it, but not for my own company, not for Elegnano. I do help customers with that. And I have to say that for me, a lot of it is just about network building. I do go to a lot of events, and that's just one of the incredible things about the San Francisco Bay Area to me, is that anywhere in the dog park, in an Uber, you can bump into people that have incredible connections, and they also are very willing to share those connections. So I remember my first plane to San Francisco, I was actually sitting next to a person, starting to talk to him, and he said, well, I'm organizing a pitch night tonight for VCs and angel investors. You should come by. And so I just, even though I was very tired after being on a plane for 13 hours, I just went, and that's how you build your first connections. And there's just a lot of that happening. It doesn't always come to you automatically, but going out there yourself and networking, and even people that you may not, especially in the Bay Area, then don't judge people based on their looks. Anyone can really get you a connection to really influential people. So that would be my advice.
This is the beauty of the US. You can bump
into
anyone and have great connection with them on a business level. We have a lot of questions. Another one from Volker. Is there anything patentable in order for imitators to hinder their entrance?
Well, I'm not really, we've never really wanted to block off nanotechnology being used by other brands. There is definitely a lot of interest in it, but there's also a lot of R&D investment needed to do it. That is not very compatible with how most brands are working. Like many places in the fashion industry, even huge companies don't own their own factories, don't own their own tanneries. So they source them where it's the cheapest, where it's the easiest. So with a technology like this that is specific to the secret sauce of a tannery, it would require them to constantly do the same R&D over and over again to make sure that the leather that they're using has that technology. So a lot of brands don't want to go there. And then the fashion industry in general, most of brands are not, even high quality ones are not that interested in creating products that last very long. You have definitely a few like Hermes or Delvaux. Those are like really elite brands that stand for quality, but most of them, their really cycle is 6 months. So the durability of the nanotechnology for them, the quality that comes with it is less important. It's more about the design. That being said, so the technology is patented. It's not patented by us because of that reason. So I worked with companies that were already doing it for other industries, and they patented it for the leather, but we didn't take part in it because I realized early on that the applicability large scale would be rather small. So, and as far as the heel goes, we didn't, I've looked into that, but didn't end up not taking a patent on that because in fashion, you're not very protected even with a patent. So a few small changes in a shoe, actually 7 changes, I think is enough for it not to be a copy. That's also why a lot of big brands like H&M can get away with a lot of copies, because the size of the stitch of stitching a different color shade are enough to not or could be considered a difference. So in that the money that had to go into it for it made it not really worth it. And also knowing that big companies would copy it anyway if they wanted to, a patent wouldn't stop them. I see a lot of brands and fashion tech brands that have patented all of them very similar things. Like you have the heels that change heel height and insoles that feel like sneakers. It's usually spending a lot of money on something that will get copied anyway. So in that sense, we try to be as innovative as possible and come up with new things. This has been copied by other brands, but as I also know, the lifetime of most of this is 6 months, and then they'll move on to something else. So for us, it's a signature, and that's fine.
I have a remark that your shoes are splendid, and it looks like Andy Warhol paintings, you know. So maybe at that time you will be able to make some collaboration with the artist. I have another question. So let me check. Yes, about your sales channels. So you talk about your strategy to do only online. Do you focus also having other channels like salespeople who present your beautiful shoes as local fairs, events, or at home?
So yeah, we've actually went through a whole cycle. At some point, I did sell through stores, but fairly quickly stopped with that. We also do a lot of pop-up stores that kind of stopped with the pandemic because they weren't happening. It was really hard to plan. But in the beginning, we did them all over the world. So that was definitely kind of from like real events that were with a lot of other brands to just our own in the middle of nowhere, kind of attracting attention and really positioning the brand. And then, as I said, with one of the things that we're trying to do with making fitting easier is, for example, that really tried like the home, have people try on shoes at home, deliver a bunch of shoes at the same place where people can try them on with friends. Before the pandemic, you could come by our headquarters as well to have like an experience. We haven't restarted that yet. Situation is not super stable yet in Belgium. And then another one is that we do work with shoe stores in the sense that if people are like, yeah, I really want to try them before I buy, I'm also not selling a $20 product. So if you want to try 4 different ones, that would mean you have to pay 2,000 euros upfront and then get 1,500 back. Might not be what you had in mind. So then we can send them to a shoe store and then you go try them at the shoe store, and we work directly with the shoe store for the payment afterwards. So then you can just walk away and say, well, I'm not going to buy any of them, or you can buy 1 pair or 2 pair without having to go through the upfront spending. So we do try to be like innovative and find ways and be very flexible, different than the traditional business models.
Yeah, you talk about pricing as well. What is exactly your market position, comparing yourself to other footwear producer, high price niche versus high volume?
We're definitely high price niche. It's also partly because of the technology, the type of product that we're designing, the fact that we're working in Italy, and if you look at this shoe, for example, it has a lot of really small pieces. It requires a lot of skill to make something like that. It's actually, at this point, there are no robots that are really capable of doing this yet, because you're almost like 3D. We can do 3D knit yet, but not 3D stitch leather at this level. So we need actual craftsmen to do that. So we are definitely a high-end brand by choice. As I said as well, it's about exclusivity. If you look at the high-end market, you have brands like Louboutin and Manolo Blahnik, Jimmy Choo. I actually read an article about it earlier this week, and it's clear also for people that are in the industry, we're kind of moving beyond that. Those luxury brands are becoming accessible to a lot of people. People are saving up for it. You have different ways of buying them at secondhand or at cheaper. You have a lot of websites that are available. You can rent a runway. So there are so many ways now that made for people that really want something exclusive and different. And that's, for example, why we do well in countries like the Middle East, countries in the Middle East, is that they want something really exclusive. And then you need to go to the high-end niche brands that create something at a higher price, but that you just know that what you have is not going to be made in thousands of pairs. So as far as pricing goes, our ballerinas retail around 200, or men's shoes retail actually around 250. So it's not that much. They also require a lot less stitching and manufacturing. And then our boots are 700 euros. So it's definitely more high-end than what you can find at the majority of the stores.
We have a question from a proud owner of a pair of your shoes in West Hollywood in Los Angeles. So since you mentioned slow fashion, what is your view on retail and sustainability post-COVID? Are your consumers buying more consciously? Is there a trend that will maintain, or is just another marketing gimmick?
Well, I think the fashion industry itself is kind of making it a marketing gimmick, which is frustrating for a lot of brands that do actually care about what they're doing. Is that more and more brands are jumping on it because that's what's resonating with the general population, especially millennials and Gen Z, that are more and more paying attention to it, demanding it, without really the brands going all the way. On the other hand, you can always say it's better that they do something, even if it's greenwashing for 75% of it. The 25% that they're doing is at least something. But to give an example, a lot of what's happening is, for example, using recycled materials, recycled plastic bottles in insoles, in just entire shoes. Big brands are doing that. What's actually happening is that they're buying unused plastic bottles. They're just producing plastic bottles so they can use them to use recycled material. So it's more about the trend for a lot of brands rather than really, which is not unusual for an industry like fashion that's always lived from trend to trend. I'm personally really much, I know I do use leather. I'm actually in the middle of some very important experiments to shift away from that and to use a completely different material, because there are alternatives being developed that are promising. But one of the important things with leather is that it just lasts very long, and that you can wear it for a long time, that it does age beautiful, and the whole idea, which is also part why we are in a more upscale, is that you may spend more on something but use it for longer. So I think there are actually a lot of high-end brands like Delvaux, like Hermes, that sell incredible products that you can pass on to the next generation, that people keep repairing for you, and that is really a movement within the fashion industry that is slow fashion on one hand, even though those brands do launch new collections every year, but also embracing, like, it's almost not the future, but going back to what we were used to in way 100 years ago, when people had a last at their shoemaker and they would make a pair of shoes and you would wear them for as long as you could. You had a limited pair, instead of people now buying 10 t-shirts for €5 instead of one for 50. So yeah, I hope that was more or less an answer.
Yes, I think. So I think we have no more question I see in the chat and in the Q&A. So I think we'll wrap up now. So thank you all for having joined this first episode of the series on the Belgian entrepreneurs in the US. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and stay tuned for the events of our club. Thank you so much, Katrien, for making yourself available today for people in Belgium and in the US, and for the Belgian community in general, and have accepted to share some insight with us. Thank you so much. Have a nice day all. Thank you, Katrien. Bye.
Bye.